So your buyer is clear to close, or is he? Or is he pre-approved? Or is there a loan commitment? Or something in between? But you're pretty sure it's done, right? This is Ron Wysokarski for Real Estate in a Nutshell. And today I want to talk to you about, is the client actually able to close? We all know what a pre-approval letter looks like, and I like to say that they're not worth the paper that they're printed on, because they're not. You know, pre-approval could be simply they put in their name, I don't know, a couple pieces of information, invented a number of their income, invented a number of what they got in their checking account, and out spits a letter. That could be a pre-approval letter. That's great. You know, we had one recently where it was almost like those pre-printed credit card things you get in the mail. It says, you're approved for a credit card, you just have to apply. We actually had one of those recently where the client thought that they were approved. They just got a form letter that said you could be pre-approved, and that's what they wanted to use. That went badly, by the way. But even if you've gone on to a site and you filled out some information, there are places you could generate a pre-qualification letter, but the credit may not have been pulled. They may not have verified income, pay stubs, how long of the job, any gaps in employment, haven't checked tax returns, haven't checked bank statements, sourced where the funds are coming for closing. Oh, that's a big one these days. So there's a such thing as a underwriting approval. And some banks will do those up front and then say they'll guarantee a 21-day closing because they've seen all the financials, but this just in, they're still going to want to see the latest pay stubs and anything that latest bank statements. They're still going to want to see that throughout the process, but they've done a lot of pre-underwriting. That could be a good step, but it's a little bit longer, and not every buyer is ready to take that time up front before they go look at properties, which is what we like to do, is show properties and write offers that become contracts. And sometimes we get ourselves in a bind. Once we've got a pre-qual letter, or maybe even underwriting, conditional approval, we're still going to meet those criteria that the lenders put out there. A couple of things that pop up are not easily avoided. You see, because buyers may think they're being truthful on the loan application, and maybe they've worked for the last couple of years at a variety of jobs in the same field, and maybe they took a shortcut and didn't list them all. Recently, I became aware of a client that said they worked in the same field for the last 10 years. What we didn't know is they had 6 jobs in 18 months and a 4-year gap in employment. They were in the field for the last 10 years in their mind, but the underwriter didn't look at that so kindly, and there was all different variations of the income during that time, and some jobs were really, really short. So that got in the way. The amount of money that was in the bank, sometimes it's not there. So if you're getting a gift letter, this just in, it's going to be sourced and seasoned. And if you're getting $5,000 from your parents, they need to see the check go in the account, show it clear, get a new bank statement. And by the way, they want to see the account where your parents wrote the check from, which is a little invasive for the parents. They just want to write the check. They may not want to show their bank statement to the lender, or even their kids for that matter. So that could be dicey. Now, the other hiccup along the way is money that goes into the account, and let's say cash, that can't be sourced and seasoned. Let's suppose just for a minute that you sold a car, a boat, a Harley, something like that, and you got $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, and you plopped it in the bank 3 days before closing because that was your cash to close and you were just gathering it all together. Your lender is likely to ask you, hey, where did that $5,000 come from? Because you can't borrow to borrow. They're going to assume that you cash advanced a credit card or did a payday loan or something like that, which they have to source and factor into the underwriting approval. It could very well have just been a sale of something, but you would probably need to have a picture of the title if it was a car or a boat or a bike or something like that. Maybe the bill of sale, maybe a copy of the check, those type of things. The bank's just not going to say, oh, $5,000, we'll just ignore that. They're going to want to see how it got there. And until you've got underwriting approval, you can't get a clear to close. And clear to close means you're almost there. But you can't get a CD, a closing disclosure, until you're clear to close. So your flaming hoops really aren't flaming hoops, they're just steps. And they're sequential, they're not simultaneously. Until you have underwriting approval, we can't talk about clear to close. Until we're clear to close, we can't talk about a CD. And once you get a CD, it still has to be verified, agreed upon by the title and the lender, and then the buyer has to sign it. Oh, and then your 3-day cooling off period. So if you're just getting it today, say on a Wednesday, and you're hoping to close on Friday, not so fast. You're probably not actually closing on Friday because you haven't had the 3-day waiting period to cool off and make sure it's a good loan. So it could be Monday. You could be missing rate locks. You could have to have contract extensions. Some of that has to go back to the underwriter. So you can have this vicious cycle, and it can get frustrating. So when you have a client who's dragging their feet on certain steps in a loan approval process, or skipping steps, or maybe telling less than the truth, even accidentally. Some people don't do it maliciously. They just kind of forget or didn't think it was a big deal. And I got the cash. I don't need to prove that. Well, your bank thinks you do. If you want that loan, the bank certainly thinks that you need to do that. Where do you go from here? Tough call. It's not about switching lenders to find the right fit for that. It's just knowing up front that these are things that pretty much any lender wants to see in 2020. And going forward, I doubt that they're going to ask for less documentation. As an agent, the best thing that you can do is get that pre-approval letter and call the lender. Ask them the basics. You don't need to know the credit score and the income. What you need to know is, hey, based on this, are we doing a conventional loan, FHA, VA? Are they able to pay their own closing costs, or do I need to be asking for that up front? Because if you do, then you could call up all the agents out there and say, listen, I've got a client, they're well qualified, but right now, in order for them to buy a house, they're going to need 3% for FHA, perhaps up to 6%, or 4% for a VA. They're going to need help with the closing costs. Is your seller willing to entertain an offer that involves closing costs? Because if they're not, maybe not show that property. Don't let your client fall in love with it if they can't have it. Show the properties to be successful, and all along the way, communicate with that lender. Make sure that you're doing the right things. You've got the right disclosures, and you've got the VA guideline in there, and you know that there's a termite exam coming up on there to make sure that the wood rot is in there, there's no termites. All these things get lumped into it. Financing doesn't have to be hard, but we can't skip steps, and I think that's where most agents run into trouble, is sometimes they're just not aware of that extra step. Now, I was in the mortgage business for a long time, and I know a thing or two about it, that's for sure. I don't know if I know everything these days, but I know a lot about it. So if you've got questions about financing, I'm happy to assist with that. There's a lot of great lenders that can also help with these items. But the main thing is communication, from front to back. Let's make sure that we get the steps in place to help our clients be successful, and we don't break their heart at the end. They end up losing the house that they really wanted, because let's face it, sometimes we know up front with a little bit of research if the deal's not going to work out. If this raises a couple questions for you, please comment below, like it, subscribe it. We'd love to have you around this a lot more, and we love your involvement. We appreciate you. This is Ron Wojciechowski with Real Estate in a Nutshell.